That's a plane crashing into an airport. And it's not done with CGI. No, it was done practically. Now, who would be crazy enough to direct this? Well, it's Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan is a pretty interesting director and filmmaker, known for his use of only practical effects and not CGI. His latest film, Oppenheimer, didn't even use CGI. Now, Christopher Nolan does use visual effects in his movies to make it feel more immersive, but he doesn't tend to use CGI. But why? Well, we need to start from the first example of his use of practical effects, was in Batman Begins. Now, even though this isn't his first major film he worked on as a director, like Insomnia and Memento, this was his first early example of Christopher Nolan's first example of his use of practical effects and a little to no CGI. An example in this movie is in the Batmobile car chase, where, as they said,
so really there's no room for error. I mean, one little thing goes wrong and somebody's life is in danger.
Because the chase will not be filmed in front of a green screen or in a studio, but will be filmed in real life. As Christopher Nolan puts it,
we wanted to be able to use the Batmobile as a real car and have a real car chase that looks back to, the French Connection and films like this, not the usual kind of studio-bound use of the Batmobile.
Which just shows the craziness of how they created that scene, and it is a good example of Christopher Nolan's practical effects. The next movie that shows Christopher Nolan's practical effects is in The Dark Knight.
Let her go. Very poor choice of words.
Which is filled with tons of practical scenes, like when they flipped an entire truck over. The driver was a man named Jim Wickley, which was a veteran stuntman in movies such as The Dark Knight, Inception, and Mad Max. He pressed a button inside the truck to flip the truck over, and the phone recordings of it was pretty insane. Another example of crazy practical effects in The Dark Knight was the blowing of a hospital, and took months to find a hospital to destroy, because who would be crazy enough to let a crew blow up a hospital? A helicopter was also used to capture some footage, and here's some footage of the hospital building all blown up. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the acting in The Dark Knight, which honestly, I could make a whole video about it. The next movie that Christopher Nolan directed with crazy practical effects is Inception.
The infinite staircase. See? Paradox.
Inception has some pretty amazing scenes in it, but we will mainly focus on the most iconic, the hallway fight scene. It took over 500 crew members and over 3 weeks to complete the scene, and was shot in a London airplane hangar. The hallway needed to rotate 360 degrees, and they needed to attach the actors with wires. The sets also moved vertically and twisted. Gordon Levitt also had to move carefully, and he needed to tighten his muscles to make it seem that he was floating in zero gravity.
In real zero G, and I've actually spoken to people that have been in real zero G, what they told me is they've never felt so relaxed in their life. What I did is the exact opposite of that.
The next movie is The Dark Knight Rises, and the airplane scene in particular when Bane gets dropped off the plane. However, they didn't want to use real and living people to be in that situation, so their thinking was to use mannequins as actors falling out the plane and filming it. That's why the actors look not alive and human. The next film, and one of the most memorable by Christopher Nolan, is Interstellar.
No!
Now, Interstellar is a real one because it's one of the first movies that depicted a real black hole visually. And the movie worked with theoretical physicists and scientists like Kip Thorne to make and depict a real black hole, and during that time, there were no real clear images of a black hole. But Nolan and his team finally worked out a visual image of a black hole, and later on, this visualization of a black hole will be proven to be accurate after a few photos were taken of it. The VFX crew also took notes and made a physics-based rendering software to try and depict the black hole, which I can praise. Bravo, Vince. Fun fact, Miller's Planet was actually filmed between North Atlantic and Iceland, where there's a lot of water and glaciers there. Another movie is Tenet, which I talked about, like crashing a plane into an airport. The plane was a Boeing 747, and it crashed into the Southern California Logistic Airport, which was a former Air Force base in the 1940s to the 1990s. Christopher Nolan actually wanted to use VFX to shoot a scene, but changed his mind when he got to the set. I guess that works out. The latest film from Christopher Nolan was Oppenheimer, which used actual explosives to recreate the Trinity test. Although it's not to its real size, but a good recreation of it, using explosive chemicals like propane, aluminum powder, and magnesium. And these are just a few of Christopher Nolan's use of only practical effects with no CGI. And the key reason for Christopher Nolan's use of practical effects are boiled down to only one reason: realism, to make it feel more real and immersive. And Nolan said that he thinks that CGI is a bit safe and wants a bit of a challenge. Classics to Christopher Nolan. And I look forward to other projects because who knows when you'll